Thank you. All right. Well, my name is Maricela Aceves Wexler. Pronouns are she, her. Thank you so much for being here with us for the June 2022 solstice with the Illuminate Systems Change Network. I am the community coordinator and admin whiz for Illuminate. And I am calling in from what is today a sunny Houdini, which is Wiyot land, commonly known today as Arcata, California, on the northwest coast of the state. And I would like to pass it to Lou to say hello, and then we'll keep rolling.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome, Mardliki Gail. Also, please let me know if I'm not pronouncing your name properly. Please let me know that. I want to know. I want to sing the song of your name. So my name is Luis Alejandro. A lot of my friends call me Lou. So after this session, then you can call me Lou too. I'm a fat black man with beard, gap teeth, wearing a coral colored shirt, and you don't see this, but I'm wearing pants this time. And they're in the color of like a hot orange. Maricela and I wanted to match the energy of the summer solstice fire that comes from the sun, right? And I'm zooming in from land of the Lenapehoking, the Bronx, New York City. I'm a commitment to transforming leadership and learning into spaces of justice, equity, and freedom. I currently am serving as the network doula for Illuminate. And so this and all of my work happens at the intersections of spirituality, justice, healing, and liberation. And I'm so excited to be kicking it with y'all today. Yeah.
Thanks, Lou. So I'm going to let you know what journey we're on together today, take you through the session flow, give a little bit of context to Illuminate and some of our current projects. And so where we're headed today is after a bit of an introduction and sharing about the network, we will have a grounding, solstice grounding to come into this space with intention together. We'll have some time to meet each other, talk with one another in breakout rooms. We will learn about some of the emerging themes from the network, and that will inspire a fishbowl conversation with some of our core team members who are present with us today. And that'll be a time where folks can jump into the conversation, and we'll let you know how to do that at that time. If there's time, we're going to do a closing breakout where we get to connect again around what we're learning, offer a few reminders, and head for a closing celebration. There isn't a break today built in, but obviously we hope you know to take care of your bodies, do what you need, stretch, bio breaks, whatever is necessary, take care of yourselves. That's always welcome. Okay, so who is Illuminate? We are a collaborative network designed to connect people and organizations committed to cultivating the field and practice of systems change towards a just, equitable, and regenerative future for all. We focus on and emphasize in our work and vision, learning, connection, and support. We learn across different ways of knowing, being, and practicing systems change and share what we're learning as we go. We connect people together who facilitate, train, and fund systems change practice on an international level. And we support experiments, both financially and otherwise, to help the field expand, strengthen, and deepen. Some of the projects that make these things possible that are happening right now, this isn't everything, but what we want to uplift today, we've got our Luminary cohort. And this is a cohort, we're 6 months in. It's a learning community of systems leaders and practitioners from around the world that are pursuing inquiries about the edges of the field of systems change practice. And they're going to be sharing their work through a variety of digital offerings over the next 6 months. So keep an eye out for opportunities to interact and see those. We also have our bridging cohort, and this cohort connects and pays attention to the work of bridging from and between leaders who are working from non-dominant spaces and communities, bridging across communities, power structures, and across existing systems. And this cohort is working together to create a sharing of the insights from their work over the past year plus. So I think they're in year 2 currently now with this work. And we do have co-luminary and bridgers here today that we're going to be in conversation with. So really excited for that. Additionally, we've got Clubhouse chats going. This is a new-ish series with the current theme, At the Edge of Systems Change. And these are live conversations with community members that you can join and participate in live. And we also post these on our website, the session recordings and or the transcripts. So we'll keep updating those as they come. Power and Justice webinar series is coming up as well, which is an international conversation or conversations about power in the systems change field and the role of equity and justice work in changing systems. So keep an eye out for announcements for that, looking to launch late summer, early fall. We hope you'll join us for those. There's also going to be some workshop elements to those, most likely, maybe not all, but definitely to some. So hope to see you there and be connecting with you more in those spaces. Lastly, from me, we've got our funder node. Excited to share that this is going to be live and in action in the coming months. And this is a cultivated space for peer learning, candid conversation, and support for funders looking to or who could benefit from power, equity, and justice-centered learning communities that are digging into systems change. So there's all of this and more. Keep an eye out, and we will communicate as things emerge and come about.
Thank you so much, Maricela. Just gonna give a few moments, a few beats for folks to also catch their breath, especially if you're as excited as I am, and especially if you're new. If this is the first time you're engaging with the Illuminate community, you catch your breath. Catch your breath. Also, I'm very excited to add you to the people that are supporting me behind. So hopefully after this session, I can add some new faces to this background. And so to offer some more context, right? Not that we could ever have enough context. The summer solstice, the solstice soiree, the longest day of the year. A day that many believe to hold the greatest energy, the greatest prosperity, the greatest vitality, the greatest strength. In pagan times, celebrated as Litha, right? Where rituals were conducted to honor the sun gods, the divine light, and the element of fire, the fire of the sun. Right? And so today, we definitely wanted to honor that energy, right? And also create that energy here within ourselves and throughout, specifically this field we call the field of systems change, right? And so the intention for today's solstice soiree and all of the solstice soiree are for us to energize ourselves under the warm light of that sun, right? In that, many believe that because the sun was the strongest that day, today, so too was the power of God, of the gods, etc. Right? And so there's many ways to pay tribute to that energy, right? One way we're doing that is by gathering with each other, by convening under that warmth and under that cold for folks that are on the other side of the solstice, right? And definitely encourage you after this, before this, at some time, to continue that reverence, right? By going outdoors, bringing nature into your home, maybe setting up a little like fairy garden, doing some yoga, doing something, lighting a candle. And so, for those that may not have the time, or those that want to continue to build context, we also carved out some time to do that here. And so in a moment, Tatenda will be leading us in an offering that I'm also excited about. Tatenda, all yours.
Good evening, everybody. Hello. Oh, no. Hello, not good evening. I'm happy to be part of this gathering. It is winter solstice where I am, so it's very yin. So I decided to actually do an exercise where we would acknowledge the energy that spans both the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere. So Lou has already said it, but winter solstice is a period when the sun is at its lowest point for us. So we have really short days, and we acknowledge that it is the primacy of feminine energy, whereas summer solstice, you have long days and it is the primacy of masculine energy. So this exercise is to bring in the principles of yin and yang. And it really calls to question how we balance those things. So how do we cultivate new beginnings while simultaneously energizing the saplings that already exist? This is the intention of this mindfulness practice. So I'll introduce myself. I am Tatenda Nzinga Mazue. I'm an artist, I'm a specialized healer, and I'm a shaman yogini. So in a brief way, I like things, I love harmony, and I love to experience and recreate beauty, however that looks, even the messy parts of it. I'm happy to be here, and I prepared a mindfulness practice for everyone. So if you could take some time to get comfortable in your seat, just take a moment. If you have to adjust the temperature, if you have to sit on the floor, if you have to sit on a chair or adjust anything, if you could just do that. Because this is not about anyone else in this space. It's really about coming to yourself so that you can be present as you without any expectations. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. All right. So now take a moment to let go of your expectations. Allow your breath to flow into and out of you, letting go of any anticipatory energy. Instead, welcome any form of self-compassion and patience. In this space, bring yourself to an anchored, aware state of presence. Note that as I speak, there will be a few breath cues. So rather than questioning why they arise, simply be present with them. Give yourself over to the grace of simply being. Fall into a space of zero expectation and zero judgment. This is where you meet you. Invite you to sense what this place means for you, what your presence for you and with you means. You may take a few long, deep breaths here if you choose. With each breath, welcome patience. In this space, ask yourself, what sort of stories have I brought with me into this moment? Are there any personas that I am playing out right now? Are there any places where I feel I have to show up in a certain way, receive in a certain way, respond, or react in a certain way. If you meet any of these stories, allow all of these stories to just dissolve in your presence. With the rise and fall of your breath, imagine that everything that is not at the essence of who you are simply drifts away. This is a space of acceptance. From this place of acceptance, become more aware of the sounds around you. Not the sounds you necessarily expect to hear, the sounds you would like to hear, but rather an awareness of what it is that is all around you. This listening allows you to connect with what is within you and what is around you, with no impetus to criticize, name, shame, or judge. Take a moment here to ask a few more questions. What does it mean to hold on? What does it mean to let go? Is there anything in you, a resistance, an unwillingness that is really ready to release itself? Perhaps it's a way of thinking that you are ready to meet within you, a way of being, a presence. With this question at the center, gently bring your attention to your heart space. This is where your soul urge resides. What do you hold here? What is your call to aligned expansion? Hold on to the texture of this awareness as you come back to the present moment. With your eyes closed, shrug your shoulders, slowly blink your eyes open, first half, then full, and then open your eyes and be present now. Right. Thank you for sharing that space. I don't know if anyone has anything that they would like to share about the insights they received, or if it's just a crest you would like to write on.
Amazing. Thank you, Satenda. Actually, I was thinking we're going to do a quick breakout, actually, where folks can share a little bit more about what they may have received with each other. Thank you so much, Satenda, for leading that and for offering us that space. Thank you. So we're gonna do breakouts right now. And in that breakout, there are some questions on top of, like, you know, how did that practice, that offering resonate with you, and how are you bringing it into the session? We have some more questions here, right? And so in there, you'll see in the chat, of course, we'd love for you to share your name. We'd love for you to also share what system you're most trying to influence or shift from what to what. And I'm gonna add an extra one just because Tatenda, you offered me the energy to be audacious enough to ask this question also. How are you seeking to shift or be influenced? I'm going to throw that in there as a bonus question. And so I believe we have, let's see, I think 6 minutes in there. Just check in with Maricela. Do we have 6 minutes for that?
Yes, we do.
Okay, cool. And we'll be zoomed out into breakout rooms in just a moment. All right. So in just a moment, I'm going to be sharing the mic with our learning weaving squad. But just want to check in, give some time for folks to maybe private message each other with any contact information you'd like to share with each other, or anything else. Maybe we know that sometimes our Zoom bouncers are a little bit aggressive in pulling people back into the main room. So are there any last things you want to share with each other? That'd be great. Good. All right, cool. Good. Right, cool. And so I'd love to welcome Anna, I believe, right? Am I welcoming you, Anna, onto the Zoom stage?
Yeah.
All yours.
Thank you. So I'm Anna, work at the School of Systems Change, but also working with Tatiana and Rachel as part of Illuminate, and really here to serve Illuminate and try to understand how we can weave together the learning across all our work and really serve the not only Illuminate, but therefore the field of practice and thinking about how it can evolve and really seeing learning as a core strategy or the core process of strategy of what we're doing. So in order to do that, myself, Tatiana and Rachel have been thinking about how do we look and support this learning weaving to serve the evolution of the field, the birthing of a new field, and to see what is there and what is happening across all the different activities. And we've done that by bridging, looking at the work of bridging, looking at the work of River Delta, which was about capacity building, looking at the Lumary cohort, the mapping work, the visualizing work, looking at the funders nodes, all that work we shared a moment ago. We've been digging into it. We've been reading things, we've been listening to it, we've been pulling out insights and quotes, really trying to base it on the conversations and the real words that others have used to try to figure out, what are those threads? What are those threads of questions and ideas that are coming out from the work that we've been doing, but more importantly, therefore, the work of the people we're connected with, many of you as well. And we're still working on it. We're still there. So part of today is not just sharing those themes, which Rachel will share with you now, but also testing them, challenging them, saying, are these really the ones that are coming out? What does it stimulate? So this process today and yesterday is also an evolution of kind of what is those themes? Do they resonate? How do we continue the conversation? It's always in movement. I think somebody said in movement. That's what we want. So that's the learning weaving in the context. So Rachel, I'll pass over to you to share what some of those themes were.
Yeah, thank you. And I think Maricela is going to share a slide that we have with a bit of a summary, if that's okay. Yeah, but let's have a look. Yeah, so as Anna said, we have just been trying to, so we think that learning's a really important part of Illuminate. The field of practice in its current form has, developed and evolved. It needs to continue to evolve in certain ways. And so we've been trying to kind of look at all of the reports that have been written, the blogs that have been written, the things on the kind of Mighty Networks platform, all of the write-ups from the nodes, etc., to try and get a sense of what's going on. And this is going to be, you know, first stab at it, get some feedback today, we'll keep working on it, we'll bring others into it. So it's not a finished thing, but it's just to share back with you some of the things that keep coming up. So the first one is around power. So it's a theme that cuts through all of the work that we did, like all of the different nodes bring up this issue, and it's emerged in many levels and dimensions of the conversations that we've had so far. So there's an awareness and analysis of power dynamics and the need to integrate the topic of power and the issue of power into practice. There's questioning around who decides, who frames systems practice, who decides who resources it, and the need to name the systems, the meta-narratives around gender, race, class, sexual identity, ability, among others. And finally, there's a whole thing around appropriating power. The second theme is around like a call to deepen practice. So, you know, a sense that like, while externally it seems that there is more interest in systems change internationally, like funders are more interested, the big kind of organizations start to talk about systems change. For the people that are leading systemic change work, there's a call to deepen practice. And this came up across our different, like the different nodes, from the funders node to River Delta, which is a group of systems change practitioners, to yeah, many of the other sections as well. Around Luminary Fund, for example, it was a big theme. So the importance of centering and deepening healing, human experience, the practice of somatics, the idea of tunneling, which came from the bridging work, particularly from Tanya Bell Torres, who's part of that group. And these are all practices which we've heard in our kind of scanning for themes. Other themes that came across the board from people who are working on this was like, this work is exhausting, it has a human cost, it's you know, there is a kind of burnout element to doing systems change work, the need to center the human, themes around yeah, focusing and centering healing as a practice for systems change, and somatics, sensing into what our body is telling us, not just our brain. And then the final one that was a big theme was around field level shifts and instability. So, you know, we have things like climate change and COVID, things that have seemed stable are no longer stable. And the big theme around navigating the unknown. An acknowledgement that like a lot of power players in the system change field have been shifting their organizations and their strategies. And there are a lot of mindsets within kind of the current social and environmental change fields that are not aligned with systems practice. And then an edge question that emerged and was repeated throughout all of our work was this, that came a lot from the work of Jorge, who's on this call, is part of the bridging cohort, but also came up in other nodes, was the importance of centering the global south, so that there is a clear tension related to the dominance of the global north and Western constructs in systems practice. And yeah, it just felt necessary, it feels necessary to center the global south. So not about kind of international development or scaling work out, but around working with centering the global leaders already working in that region, and acknowledging that peer guides could illuminate ways to forward the field. Yeah, so that's it, Lou, and I'll hand back to you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you so much, Google Slides, for the funky animations. Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, so just, I put them in the chat, right? So power and location, practice, learning and strategy, field level shifts and instability, the call to deepen practice, and centering the global south. Again, shout outs to Jorge, who's here and will be part of our fishbowl activity for helping to lead that conversation and having us really engage with that, right? So fishbowl, fishbowl. So we're gonna have a fishbowl in just a moment, right? And so the fishbowl is really, I would say, an opportunity for us to go a little bit deeper, right? Get a little bit deeper into the conversation around these themes, right? And as you might be able to tell from my Zoom background, I don't like to do a lot of things by myself. And so I have some friends that will be helping me be in that conversation, you included, right? And so this is how it'll work. There are a few folks that are going to be spotlighted up onto the Zoom stage. And we're going to do a first round with those folks sharing. Their first share will be them sharing their names, the systems that they're engaging with, their relationship to Illuminate, and then answering the prompt. And then after that first initial round, we'll make sure to invite folks. And so do what you need to do to be present, to be willing to come up on stage and share your brilliance with us, right? The way that it's going to work is when you are ready to share, if and when you feel ready to share, you'll tap Maricela, hey Maricela, in a private message, and she will make sure to pull up a seat for you, right? So that you can come up on the stage also. Cool. Yes, thank you. And so let's bring up some folks. Bring them on up. Maya, Anshul, Habiba, Jorge, Ana Lucia, welcome. Right. Let's get this conversation going. Are y'all okay for me to continue?
Yeah.
Good. Right. Power. Right. Invocation, practice, learning, and strategy. This analysis around power that we're talking as possibly kind of lacking sometimes in the work that we're doing, right? And that having certain implications on how we get to do the work, on who we do the work with or for, etc., brings some limitations to it, right? And so for this initial round, I'd love for folks here to maybe share a little bit about that, right? And so when power is at play, right, the limits, the boundaries, and the limitations of that, I'm curious to know, where are you seeing the limits of the field of systems change, and what are its implications to your work? You can just unmute yourself and let's get it going.
I will give it a go. So for me, I think first thing I'd say is, why is this a use field?
Oh, Habib, I'm sorry.
Field?
Can you introduce yourself first?
Oh,
everyone,
yes, yeah.
everyone, upon first mic check, introduce yourself first. All right, let's go.
Hi everyone, I'm Habiba. I'm based in London, in England, and I work for an organization called Lankelly Chase. I'm very excited to be here. I've got my notepad ready to just learn and listen from all of you. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to be stealing things you're going to be saying, and thank you for being my teachers. And so what I wanted to share was starting with, why do we as an organization find the ideas around systems appealing, was to do with this idea of interdependence. This idea of kind of holism, this idea of we're so deeply entangled, but the way we see the world is very linear and siloed. And so that was the interest for us. And so the limitations, I guess, tend to be, I'll pick out three things, I guess. One is how this work is not necessarily for everybody. It's mainly for those of us who are educated in the Western way of seeing the world, because that's the way that has been globalized. That's the way that's been institutionalized, and that's the way schooling happens. The way universities, the way the media. So those of us who are deeply entrenched in that way of seeing the world are really the ones who need this. Because then it's not about including other people, because there's a plural of us. There's a world out there that is full of many, many ways of seeing the world that has been marginalized, mainly through colonization, but of course through globalization and kind of the institutionalization as well. So that's one. The other thing is really the political, I guess, understanding for us as a foundation. I think there isn't enough acknowledgement that there is a world order, a Euro-American world order that is funded and is maintained and is seen as universal and normal, and therefore is pushed throughout everything, pushed through the IMF or a bank, all the international institutions, the corporations, schooling, university. And this is a deliberate world order. And I think we don't always understand or even talk about it. And here we are trying to fund work that is about entanglement, that's about systems, that's about finance, that's about governance. And we don't really understand how this world order works. And we don't even talk about it, and we don't make it visible. And then the third thing is really about how do we change ourselves? Because we talk a lot about other people changing, but how do we change ourselves? So those are sort of the things I saw as limitations, and we're trying to kind of work on and have deep implications for our own work. I'm finished.
I could go next. Thanks, Habiba. I'm Maya, and Anshul here, and I have started this consultancy called Whole and Perspectives in Mumbai, in India, with this vision to develop the systems thinking ecosystem in India, because we believe that even as we speak, it's still at a nascent stage with a lot of potential, given how huge and complicated India itself is. But in our work, what we've seen and addressing the question of limitation, a constant challenge in systems work has been representing diverse voices and representing the lived realities of people that we are working for or working with. And so the question is, if some voices get left out, whose voices are those? And if voices get included, at what stage and for what purpose? I mean, are they just token representation, or their lived realities are really reflecting in the systems change work? Oftentimes, my sense is that's not happening, and that's what we are here to change. And this, I mean, this is coming from some experience of working in projects around healthcare, around indigenous practice in the agriculture or the food sector, where we clearly see that, like Habiba was referring to earlier, people don't see eye to eye between the community and the people who have commissioned a project. They don't speak the common language. They don't understand terminology. They don't even know what is being evaluated or what is being changed. So there is that whole gap. And in general, what I've also seen from COVID is that, again, alluding to what Habiba was earlier referring to with the world order, I feel that the concept of systems boundaries itself needs to change, because there are many of these problems where the boundary really is global, with the global south having to face a lot of brunt for things that have occurred in the global north. And so I think the need for revisiting the concepts of equity, sustainability, regenerative futures in a way that it means the same thing to a person sitting in the global north and a global south is what we need before we can talk about any deep systems change. Yeah, I'll stop there for now.
I can
Sorry,
Oh.
Anna.
go.
Okay, so I think Maya has just raised a good point, and Habiba also mentioned to that. And I mean, my brain is just firing up with this lot of thoughts when we talk about the power, right? In the whole field of the system change. And I see, like a lot of time, the power is centered in the hand of the person who is doing the systemic change work, and it's not being translated to the people who is gonna affect by the system change work. So how do we ensure that power transition is happening, and then there is a balance in this power distribution? And top of that, I mean, there is a power that also like how the system change practitioner is working in terms of utilizing the different school of thoughts, because in the field of system change there has been a lot of bifurcation in terms of different branching of methodologies and the tools and the techniques that multiple people are using, and that in that sense the power becomes very siloed and goes into those different direction and is not channelized in a proper way so that we can collectively leverage the benefit of all those school of thought, and that benefit can be shared and the power can be shared with the ultimate beneficiary or the people for whom we are talking about the system change, because the person who is designing, who is creating this change is also not an external. Many times it feels like we are as an external, but how do we embed ourselves into that whole system becomes a whole questions. I think that's from my side. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ana Lucia. I work in Mexico and Colombia in trying to figure out what place-based systems change looks like in different Latin American countries. And one of the things that pops out for me when I listen to this question and listening to Maya, Habiba, and Anshul is the question of the concept of the limit itself. Because if you think about it, for example, in ecological terms, some boundaries are completely permeable. I don't know how to say, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly in English, but they are fluid. You have ecotones that can be full regions in which the limit is more like a transition, from one thing to another thing. And I started kind of playing with that idea in my mind, like what would limits in the field of systems change look like if we thought about them as ecotones, for example, in this sense of regions that are a transition of something to something else. And what if we thought about them as actual, like, that also exist in nature and in different places, like very specific, discrete boundaries, like, I don't know, a piece of grassland next to a primary forest. And what are the interactions that are happening there, and what if we could put our focus and our attention in the kind of the diversity and the richness and the abundance that we find in these places, regardless of whether it is a whole region that is a transition between one ecosystem from another or whether it is a boundary that just divides some grass, some garden from a primary forest, because in both cases, they are always full of life, and they are rich habitats for every sort of critters and creatures and living beings that never come in contact with each other to actually do, and to collide and connect. So thinking about power and thinking about these ideas of ecotones and transitions in ecology and in places, I do wonder how we might find kind of a more nested systems approach when we're trying to do the work that we're doing, which is hard because we can all see what we can see, and the rest of the world comes to us through media outlets, through friends of friends, through social media, whatever. So it's very hard to think about nested systems impact, and not only in terms of impact, but also in terms of our everyday lives. To give a very concrete example, I'm not sure how many people, both in the global north as well as in the global south, stop to think about whether or not the avocado they're purchasing that comes from Mexico is supporting illegal armed groups in Michoacan and supporting deforestation. You just see your avocado there in the store and you get it because it's nutritious, it's delicious, it's green, it's beautiful, it smells nice, and it's seductive, and so I understand there's this difficulty to actually think about this world order, as Habiba was saying, but in terms of at least how I see it from the global south and from a place-based perspective, there is a much larger stake for us to try to exercise systems change work, because at least in Latin America, most of our countries are organized in a way that is directly dependent upon the global north. So we do ask ourselves these questions about, like, how can we create impact in a nested scale, that actually creates, like, strengthens agency locally for folks, for all sorts of communities, so that people can become stewards of their own land. That also has some effect at a regional level, and who knows what effects on a national level, right? And how might those relationships with the global north look like, if we were to think about our boundaries as these transition regions, that just carry information and diversity from one place to another. Because for me, it is very clear that there is a lot of potential there. And that at least in Latin America in particular, but I guess in other places as well, the question about power is still a question about colonialism that has many different expressions. And it is also something that doesn't have a very specific racial face. Like, it's not always white power, at least not in the places that I've worked in. Sometimes it's even between ourselves, and we share other sorts of issues regarding power that do have to do with race, but are not centered around race, and are more centered about who owns, for example, the guns, and who owns the legal, legitimate source of force, and who is able to enforce this. And what is driving those forces competing in our territories? So I think that's a lot, and it mixes up a lot of the themes that Rachel was sharing. And that's that's where I am at.
Luis, are you gonna go too, or should I go?
No, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So hi everybody, my name is Jorge. For those of you who have difficulty with Spanish, it sounds like H-O-R-H-E, Jorge. I am originally from Colombia, but I live in Vancouver, Canada. But Canada right now is trying to lean into a different relationship to the way it was formed. So one thing that happens in Canada often is that we recognize the land, the indigenous people of the land of what today is Canada. So, the land of where Vancouver is located today, the people, indigenous people of this land, is actually the Tusueletuz, Musqueam, and the Squamish people. So these are indigenous nations that lived in these lands before Canada was Canada. And as an opportunity to do differently, Canada has been trying to do that. So often you see people in Canada start by naming the land of the indigenous people, like the name of the indigenous nations that Canada or the town of Canada was from. And because of that, I've been also trying to learn about Colombia, the place I'm from. And I know that the land was of the Embera people, the Senu people. Antioquia, the region I'm from in Colombia. I'm also from a neighborhood in Medellin, Colombia, that people know as La Comuna 13. La Comuna 13 is like a distinctive neighborhood in Medellin, which has kind of an interesting political history. A lot of violence, but a lot of culture as well. And my family came to Canada as refugees over 20 years ago. I work in the leadership field. I work for a small nonprofit in Canada, but also I do little contracts, cool projects that I get invited, luckily, and Illuminate invited me to be part of a little project, which they call it a bridging cohort. And that's kind of where I met a few people, Rachel, Luis, and Tatenda. I don't remember who else in the call. So anyway, so that's a little bit about me. Yeah. So now the question, Luis. So good to meet you, everybody. Particularly, I was particularly excited to meet Ana Lucia because it's good to meet people from the South who live in the South. And so I have to say that. It's difficult to contribute to the conversation without tapping into what people were saying, because everybody spoke and I was like, oh yeah, and I want to add, but then I actually want to add more layers, which probably make it difficult for the conversation. But the 2-3 things I want to add. One, in regards to the limitations of this conversation assistance change field. One is where it's born, or one of the limitations is where it's being centered in regards to like where the resources are coming from and who are the main decision makers of the field, really, because really, like, in order for this field to be born, some resources need to be added to it, right? Like, so this has been a conversation we've had with people who are connected to the Illuminate network, like who are these people, who are the people really making decisions, and that's a limitation, not because people want to make bad decisions or because they feel limited, it's because really that's a reality check of trying to be, not because there is anything negative about it, but we do know that a lot of the resources that people really make decision making in regards to the field are mostly mostly connected to the Western world, and that has its own implication. It's not negative or positive. It's just that we need to do that in awareness. Okay, no, that's kind of the thing I've been trying to encourage us to reflect on. And with that, I'll mention 2 things. One is that in the bridging cohort, we all are supported to do a little deep dive, we call it, like just like a little focus groups where we engage in conversation. And in that conversation, I picked, let's do conversations about how the Global South can support conversations of decolonization in the Global North, okay? And that's complicated for a few reasons. One is because then things come out in that conversation that kind of mind blow me and I don't know what to do with it. But 2, is also because here's a group of people who then have some questions about, really, when you think about it, how does the Global South really have influence in the Global North? It's not usually how you think about these things, right? Like a lot of the literature around social change or social justice comes from the Global North these days, a lot of it, right? And the rest of the world consumes it, okay? But 2 things. One is that the capacity that we have to name the systems is key. So for example, right now, this systems change field is very broad. So you can talk about the sewer systems. Let's talk about the sewers. That's a system. There's a system of sewage. It actually starts to become complicated when we actually name the systems we're talking about. And in that way, then it is a thing, because then maybe we're not naming them for a reason. Because maybe we don't say, are we talking about the capitalism? Are we talking about colonization? And if we're talking about that, why don't we say it? I mean, there might be a reason, or maybe not. Maybe we actually want to talk about all the systems. And anyway, so that's kind of one thing I'm saying around the limitation of why this idea of systems change here, systems change. What systems, man? Do we want to change all the systems? I don't think so. But maybe that's the thing. That's your thing. Well, whose thing is that? Right? That's one thing. The second piece is that is two pieces that have come out from this deep dive conversation. Two things is that as people start to unpack this conversational power, particularly power that's dominant, then we should, if we are committed to social change or change the system, we need to reformulate how the power gets redistributed. That's a big challenge. When we're talking in institutions, it's sometimes easier to redistribute that power. Like we're talking about, for example, like we're talking on the staffing, or we need to now, we realize that most of the staff in this organization are white people. Then you start to distribute that, making sure that people are people of color, racialized people, women, queer folk. You start to distribute that. But when we're talking about community, then that's a little bit more challenge. Like, how do you redistribute power that is just being formulated on its own? Like community organizing is a little more blurry, and redistributing that community power is a little more challenging because we're too used to institutions. We're too used to who makes decisions on funding, who gets hired, who gets sent to the conference, who gets like that, right? That's a little, however, even that is difficult. Like people will fight over who gets hired, right? So that's kind of the challenge, right? And then with that is all like the embodied practice, right? Like, how does that really mean? Because we all, it's like it's not like we don't have one power. We actually want power, right? Right? Everybody here, we want power, right? It's not about, no, it's like, how do we replenish that power? So anyways, that's the 2 cents I wanted to add to the conversation, and I think people want that. So thank you, everybody. Really good to meet you, and hope we continue.
Okay, thank you so much. I also want to welcome Eric to the stage before I ask Eric to mute. One thing that is really standing out for me, or at least was not mentioned, was the implication around the field imagination, right? I think given, what was shared here on how, there are these, first of all, these like questions that are so difficult to answer, especially by ourselves, right? When we're not from, I would say, the context that it needs to be answered from, it also poses this limitation around what's possible, right? It also, and just to give a quick example for myself, coming from, a person that does movement work, a person that has been in the field of youth development, of community organizing, etc., right? When it comes to these conversations, sometimes, in particular, there's a political analysis that feels that's absent sometimes when we're thinking about, right, systems change, right? If we're just talking about sewage systems, etc., that for me poses a limitation on how we think about what is actually possible, right? And so if we're just thinking about what's possible inside the mind of the folks that established, the field of systems change, Western, white, academic, able-bodied, so on and so forth, then that's as far as the imagination of what's possible goes. And so I wanted to add that to the roster. Eric, welcome.
Thank you. I can relate to Jorge. I lived in Vancouver for 22 years, and So it's my second hometown at the moment. My family is still there at the moment. I'm in Cape Town in South Africa. And I miss Vancouver. Anyway, I'm an accountant by training, and I spent my career doing corporate restructurings, turnarounds internationally. And I got to a point about 3 years ago where I said, I've been there, done that, and I did a pivot into what started out as impact investing, really trying to focus on how do we solve the social development goals, just to use it as a collective term. So I immersed myself into impact investing and philanthropy and funding structures, and finance is my background. So I had a project as a pilot, or as a case study that I used as I went through all my studies to scale pathology laboratories across Africa. I worked with big consulting firms, Deloitte amongst others, do due diligence, got exposure to the World Health Organization, to all the big foundations and so on. And I quickly came to a point where I said, there's no shortage of solutions to the problems of the world, but all these solutions that are out there never ever get scaled. Then I went away and I said, okay, fine, let's stop the laboratory situation. We first have to figure out how to scale. And then I went away and I eventually summarized my own learnings for myself in a document I called Scaling Change, which basically said, I see three issues why we don't scale. The first is how we define and how we come to solutions. How do we design solutions? Yes, we design it in a linear way. Linear has a limitation, so we move to systems thinking, we move to design thinking, and the tools are out there in terms of how we arrive at solutions. We can tick. For me personally, anyway, I can tick that box. Then I said the second thing is we don't work together. We have to, why don't we work together? Why can't we, how do you build a consortium? How do you facilitate, bunches of people sitting around a table, dealing and grappling with difficult situations? How do we do that? And I have, I found solutions as far as that is concerned. So I could, they are very deliberate processes, methodologies. It's all out there if you want to go and look for it. So I said, okay, fine, I can tick that box. And then I got to my third component, and I said, the other reason why we don't scale is capital. And I went to look at impact investing, and in the end, my conclusion was that impact investing doesn't really go far enough. It stops it's too close to venture capital, and it is too far removed from grants. And you don't, for most of these systems changing projects or initiatives, you can't show a 20% internal rate of return. And all of a sudden the blinkers come up and the money loses interest. So how do we do that? Then I went away with my paper in my hand and I started knocking on doors and I said, look, I want to do pathology laboratories across Africa. It's a no-brainer. There's a big need for it. There's, I need a check, please. And it was a very, very, being in the finance world myself, it was a very huge awakening to me from personal experience now, how difficult it is to raise money and to fund a project that doesn't fit into the private equity, venture capital, the regular capital system of the world. And with all of that, I'm bringing it back to power. And my conclusion in the end for myself was, unless you change the power inherent within the capital system of the world, then we can talk about system change. We can talk about, solving the world's problems, but without capital in hand, you don't go very far. You keep bumping your head against the capital structure. So my focus, just to backtrack before I get to my focus. So I'm working with a group that developed over the last 20 years a framework called strategic doing. So my thinking process is basically, I want to be able to, when I talk to money, I want to be able to say, here's the methodology of solving social development goals in a generic sense, that is fixing how we solve problems, that is fixing how we communicate amongst ourselves when we do the project, and more importantly, that is scalable. So I can tick all the boxes except capital. So my focus now and my interest is, and that's why I'm speaking at this forum, I'm networking. My focus is to solve the capital problem. And I have very specific, just as a simple example. When you go—
Eric, just for the sake of time, yes. Maybe we have another minute left that you can share. Is that okay? Another minute for you to share.
Yes, no, I'm finished.
Yeah, okay, please go ahead.
So when it comes to budgeting, money wants to see a budget. Now, a project takes many twists and turns. So if you make a budget, there's a 3-year budget for the project or a 5-year budget, whatever. It's an absolute waste of time. So how do you do a budget? How do you value the deliverables of the project? Anyway, so my focus is to bring to the social strategic doing framework a way of solving the capital problem. If anybody is thinking about working on or whatever this issue of capital and the power of capital, I would love to network afterwards. And Luis, I'll give it back to you.
Hey, thank you so much. And thank you again for, I think, echoing those limitations. Definitely one that does not get named often and is very clear, right? The centering of capital, right? And like the limitations around there, right? Given that, like, okay, we need this thing to make some things happen and move forward, and yet, right? And so in our conversations, we touched upon the themes that were presented to us by our Learning Weaving crew, right? Around power, around the limitations of our awareness, around who gets to decide the framing, who gets to decide what and how something is resourced. I think in this conversation, we've also been able to name, the field level shifts and instabilities that exist. And we're not just talking climate and COVID, right? That's just the most present right now. And so I also want to bring us a little bit closer to this call to deepen practice, right? And it was named here, right? Different ways that we're able to deepen practice. Yesterday, Sam in Australia also named, like, how do we center eco, right? Like an ecocentric approach to the work that we're doing, right? And eco in that, like, we are part of it, that we are not disconnected from. But there's also the call to deepen our somatic practices through this work, right? Bringing back this information to the body, and also allowing the body to give us the information we need to move forward. And so one of the practices that also practice, I don't know if this is a practice, I'm actually talking too much, I'm rambling now at this point, but I want to offer, I think, at least another 3 to 4 minutes around this notion of centering the global south, right, which we mentioned really quickly, but I really want to hone in on that for the next 3 to 4 minutes, if that's okay with you folks. So specifically, the folks that mentioned it, Jorge and Lucia, and also that other folks in this fishbowl, are part of the global south. So I want to start there and have us be there for 3 to 4 minutes, if that's okay.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah, vamos.
I was gonna say that maybe for this conversation, I'll mention that one limitation initially, like I think is including the global south in order to change the current dominant model that inherently marginalizes the global south. I also want to comment and appreciate the comment from Luis in regards to, like, let's also dream of what systems we want to build, right? That's, I think there's, I would argue that they're not exclusionary conversations, that you can have both conversations as you're trying to articulate how the global south needs to be included and recognized, centered. We also, because it's been excluded, we also can start thinking of what would that look like what would it look like, more equitable practices to ensure that our brothers, sisters, siblings in the global south are recognized for the knowledge they have. And I'll just mention quickly that I think part of the energy on this is that it's like this work we're doing, without studying, because that's not my field, like I'm not academic, right? Like, I don't know if people know, like, I'm not an academic. I come from being in community organizing, mostly migrant communities organizing. That this comes from recognizing that communities in the global south are doing resistance work and powerful transformation work, often without being recognized, without it being centered around how the world needs to transform. Like, the way the world needs to transform technically always comes from, like, some thinker or some academic thinking in the global north, or somebody in the global south having access to that. So my argument is that the global south is giving us so much already that doesn't get tapped and doesn't get recognized and doesn't get treated equally. That's kind of my argument. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I agree with Jorge. There is a thing about making certain practices visible and, legitimate, valuable. I don't know. I do have a big question as to how to achieve that, because there's also a very strong system of values that we all share, because we're all Western influenced societies. That is hard to kind of destabilize, and that's a very big question for me. Like, how do you actually move a little bit the ground over which we have built our value system? And I was actually talking about it with Anshul in the breakout. Like, what is value? What is valuable for us as a society? And there were a couple of things that I heard from Eric and from Maya especially, that I'm not sure if I'm overinterpreting or not, but that always also kind of trigger this response in me, because I do think that we can all kind of build common ground as to what we value collectively, for example. However, the expression or the deployment of the process of value adding or value creating or valuing something has to be different everywhere. Because another kind of core aspect of our society now is that we're always trying to create standards for everything. And I have a huge conflict with that, because it's, and I think we all here know this, that it's an oversimplification of reality. But there is a limitation also in terms of, okay, we do need a common language. We do need some sort of reference. We do need to agree upon common goals, but how can we agree on the goal and diversify the way we approach it, you know? And what sort of inspiration can we find in the global South in terms of not only the collective creation of those goals, but also in the proposal of different strategies and pathways to achieve them, you know? Yeah, because I don't think regeneration looks the same everywhere. I don't think even, you know, capital looks the same everywhere. I don't think scaling up necessarily means doing the same thing everywhere. We have to start actually thinking about how to manage our collective goals in a diverse way. And the Global South has a lot of experience with diversity. Dude, biological and cultural diversity. I mean, we have all this millennia old experience with this, you know, living together also. Like me, for example, I have all of these inner conversations because I'm mestiza. So I'm not indigenous, but I love my indigenous heritage. And I'm not, you know, descendant of Spaniards, but I do know there's something present from all of that history in my country. My family comes from Turkish immigrants who came to the coast of Colombia like 5 generations ago. So there's also that, you know, and I love salsa colombiana, which is like a Black music movement, you know, that came from Cuba and then had its own adaptation here. So I'm a mixture of all these things. And for me, the conversation is not about how to, you know, not only about re-indigenization, for example, but it's also about how to live with diversity. And I think we can offer a lot of inspiration from the Global South for that.
If we were like in person, I feel that that's what it would sound like right now. Wow. Okay, I'm still catching my own breath. Hoping you are too. Thank you so much. Maya, Ancho, Habibo, Jorge, Ana, Eric, Freya, Rachel, Maricela, Anna, Istam, Renee, Rakeli, Berivan, Daria, thank you so much, folks, for being part of this conversation, which it's no surprise that we definitely could have used at least twice as much more time, right, in these conversations. And so I do want to leave just this last minute to have Maricela maybe share more things as we close out. And also with a question for folks, right? And so sometimes we get an opportunity to do it together in breakout rooms. This will not be one of those times, but I still want to pose it here, right? The question that I really would love for folks to take with them and to consider is, what are you learning about yourself, right? What are you learning about your work in the field, and what are you learning about the field itself? Really, Habiba, thank you. I just remember very poignantly at the beginning of the session, you speaking about the work that we need to do, you know, the transformation that we need to enact and work on in ourselves as we're engaging with the transformation of these systems as well. So thank you. Maricela, mic is yours.
Hi again. So the just final little reminders. Well, first of all, gratitude, like Lou expressed, for you all being here, for everybody who shared, and all the ways that you have, and just showing up and sharing energy in this space is really, really appreciated. And I just wanted to drop in the chat some ways to stay connected with us, if not already. We do have our newsletter that goes out about once a month. If we've got events going, we'll send a few more out, but we're not berating your inboxes on a regular basis, but hopefully some good stuff that you'll see in there. So let me drop that in the chat. And also we have a developing online platform called Mighty Networks, which is an interactive space for folks who want to be in conversation, to be in community online. You can be in conversation, post events, resources, questions that are coming up for you for engagement. And that space is still developing. And if you want to develop in that space with us, feel free to join in there. And I'm dropping that invitation link in the chat as well. There will be a follow-up to this conversation with links and resources and more things to take a look at with more time and in more depth. And that's it from me today. But I'm going to carry, it's just 10:30 a.m. where I am. So I've got my full day ahead riding this wave from today's conversation. And so Lou, I'm going to pass it over to you to close us out with some celebration. And thanks so much for your time, y'all.
Thank you, y'all. And I'm going to pass it over to Beyonce to bring us out.